接下来我们就有一些 question 啊，那也大家那个不一定要用英文发问，那个要你用中文的话，我们这边也有参与的人，所以他们的话那个来参与。那我想大家听应该都可以了啊。那能不能我们现在接受一些 question 啊，大家看好，谢谢。
Good morning. My name is Chichang Lin. Yeah, I'm an air quality engineer. Yeah, in David, and I think probably I'm not sure if you can feel it or not. You know, actually, Kaohsiung really has the worst air quality in Taiwan because it's a heavy industrialized city. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, you know, if there like one day that we can have AI to help to control the pollution sources and to improve the air quality. Yeah, or in any cases like a meteorological condition gets bad, then we can use AI to control some emission sources. And like, if we are looking at that, the vision, like we're looking at like how many years, 5 years, 10 years later, it can become true. Or what is the roadmap if we want to go step by step to reach that eternal vision?
Yes. So I think it depends on factors that I don't know about in your local area here. But I would say there are cases of other things that I've worked on that may be helpful. So when we think about how we design factories or how we operate factories, it might be that depending upon what time different operations are done and what the weather conditions are at that particular time, there may be more or less of an effect on air quality from that particular operation. So just like you may be able to have energy be used more efficiently if you think about it from different times when you're using it, right? It may be that the air quality is also affected more or less effectively based upon when you do different operations in a factory. In addition, when we think about designing factories or redesigning factories, we could think about ways to address what are the causes of the air pollution and can we do things that are more energy efficient. I don't know, is most of your energy going to be coal-based here? So again, energy efficiency would be very important, not just for what you're producing, but in terms of using the energy to make what you're producing. So a short answer would be, I think the answer is there are probably many opportunities to think about how to help optimize that with artificial intelligence, but I would have to meet with you more directly and understand what those specifics are in each of the cases. My guess would be that you could probably make very significant impact within only a couple of years of effort. But I know in America, if we were doing anything like that, there would be political issues that would also arise. And some people on one side of the political issue would not be so happy about doing things, and others would be very happy about doing things. So in America, oftentimes, it can take much longer than it might otherwise need to. I don't know how that works here for you, but I hope my answer is helpful.
Any comments from our panelists? Thank you. We take the other question.
Just provide an idea. You know, in Kaohsiung, we have just like said, highly pollution city before. Now we try very hard to try to reduce it. Another question is a problem. Is a dengue fuel. Dengue fuel in the subtropical area, like Taiwan, Hong Kong, even Singapore, is very advanced city. Is still suffering the dengue fuel disease. Do you have any idea for that?
So
using some of our prediction, or curing, or some of our vaccine.
I do. So all of those things might be possibly addressed by artificial intelligence, but related things are things that my brother has worked on. So my brother Gary, his PhD is in biology, and he's the CEO at Natural Selection Inc. So he heads up everything that we do on biotechnology and infectious disease things like HIV, and how does the virus change in your body so that we can figure out what medicine to give in the future to address what it's going to be in the future, as opposed to waiting for it to change and then addressing it later. So if we could understand a little bit more about what that, the word is pathogen, right, is doing in the body, and how to make something that would maybe block its effect, that gets back to the computational chemistry slide that I didn't have really time to talk about. But it would be something that researchers would be looking at already, I would imagine, through artificial intelligence. But I also have to say, nature is very smart, right, if we can put it simply. And so viruses have evolved to be very virulent. They're very effective. And it's often very difficult for us to figure out how to turn them off or how to defeat them. And then they mutate and they become difficult again. So there's probably no one solution to that problem. It's probably have to be a series of solutions to that problem to try to limit it. In the meantime, I guess they tell you probably wear mosquito repellent and cover your skin and the basic things. But from an artificial intelligence point of view, it would be interesting to know what the three-dimensional shape of the pathogen looks like, to see if we could do something about how it affects the body.
This is a joke. According to the statistics, a human being enemy kill most human being. Number one is mosquito.
Yes.
Second one is the people.
Yes, right. Right.
So mosquito is the largest enemy for the people.
If we could eliminate them, we'd all be happier.
看看大家还对，尤其是业界哈，有没有什么来？好，来，谢谢。你讲中文也没关系，看看他们有没有翻译。
The slide that you showed about the human emotional. Would you please tell us what's the mechanism, or how does the AI work about to deal with human emotion?
Okay, so let me see if I can answer what I think you're asking, and then we'll see if my answer is helpful. So, in the brain, as we understand the brain, there are at least two different parts of the brain that help us understand and react to things. One is the limbic system, which is an older system in the brain, and the other is the prefrontal cortex, which is more of a logical, rational part. The limbic system acts faster than the logical part. So, when we hear words, and this would be true in Chinese too, but in Western civilization, and the same English, when you hear a word, the limbic system is already processing what does that word mean, before the prefrontal cortex can come in and say, what does it mean in context? So much of sentiment analysis now in artificial intelligence looks at context. So if, let's say, Coca-Cola has an advertisement in America in the Super Bowl football game, they might want to know, do people like the ad afterwards? And so you can go to Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever and see if your sentiment analysis can pick up that people are saying things that are positive about the ad or negative about the ad. But that's all based on in context to what they're saying. So if, this is an example, let's say that Coca-Cola ad really kills it. That's positive. Okay, in English, that's positive. But as soon as the limbic system hears the word kills, it's acting on something that's more like, wow, kills. So there's something called a fight or flight mechanism. It's like, okay, either I have to fight something or I have to run, because that's the immediate emotional response. When you hear numerous times words that are like that, it can actually change your behavior. And there are studies that have been done in psychology, and I helped put this together with a friend of mine in psychology. And here's one example. I was saying this in the car ride. So many years ago, some psychologists did a study, and they had people read a very plain story. Right? Half of them read the plain story. Another half read the same plain story, but when they could, they inserted words like old. So instead of saying the woman crossed the street, it would be the old woman crossed the street, or aged, or elderly. And then afterwards they looked at, this was really clever, they looked at how quickly the people walk after they read the story. The people who read the old, aged, elderly version walked statistically significantly slower. Okay, slower, right, than the people who read the normal version. I bet you if you asked them, they would not have known that they were walking slower. In fact, they might have disbelieved that they were walking slower. But the limbic system can have an effect even though the prefrontal cortex doesn't know about it. But then the prefrontal cortex can come in and say, if it does know about it, hey, you know, calm down. Coca-Cola is not killing anything. This is good, right? So when we think about artificial intelligence for emotion, we have to understand how does the brain process what it is that we're communicating, right? Whether it's words or images, colors. In America, you will find almost every fast food restaurant uses red and yellow. People have done studies and they say that red and yellow make people feel more hungry than other colors, blue or green. McDonald's is not blue and green, it's red and yellow. Jack in the Box in America is red and white. Wendy's is yellow and red. So these are things that we have to understand by testing. How does the human brain respond to different things emotionally, and then design systems like this that we can use in order to help us generate the outcome that we want so we can communicate most effectively.
Okay, I think you talk about many applications of the AI in the industry. And I think another aspect is the AI service robot. Service robot, not the industry robot. I think the industry robot is very popular now in the world, and many factories use the industry robot.
Yes.
But I think another development is about the service robot, like the robot in family, like the robot in investment, like the robot in the supermarket. So what do you think about the future development of the service robot in the world?
Okay, so I think that's going to be a great area for investors, actually, if it's done well. And not only in all the areas that you just mentioned, but also in healthcare. Because in clinical trials and also in hospital, if we have to go to the hospital, oftentimes we don't have enough personal interaction with other people in a positive way. And I can tell you from the brief times that I've had to see doctors, if you don't feel like you're getting the attention that you want, it can be depressing. When it's depressing, you don't get better as fast as you would if you're optimistic. So it's very important really to be able to have that interaction. But it's expensive because people have to be paid to have that interaction. So if we can think about how to make service robots not just at restaurants or in the family or whatever, but also in professional settings where we need some support, whether it's physical support or emotional support, I think that will be extremely helpful and valuable. It's complicated to do that, right? Because we have to understand what does someone really need, what would they benefit from the most. So just as an example, if we're talking about a medical case, someone might be in pain. There might be a protocol to give them some pain medicine up to a certain point, but not beyond that point, right? Because that might not be good for them. So the service robot would have to understand, by being programmed to understand, what is it that's okay to interact with this person and what is not, right? And not to be able to say like, okay, well, we'll give you more medicine in 5 minutes and then have 15 minutes come, because that actually would be giving the patient false hope, which would make them more depressed. Right? So it's complicated when we're dealing with people. We're complicated things, right? But I think there's a tremendous promise in that area in many different regards. With physical robots and also with avatars on a computer screen.
I have a question for Roger. As for the emotion, do you have any plan, because your company is making the physical sensational experience. So do you think in the future, if possible, will bring emotion to your machine, or you really have this kind of plan?
After the speech, I didn't think about this question because our job is working on to do we call it amuse the non-rider system. Actually, it's a job to create fun with people. Okay, it's more like trying to make people happy. Okay,
So we are wondering if we can use the AI technology in this industry. Maybe it's very interesting. Like we talked to the owner of a theme park, like Disney. Disney, there are lots of hire lots of people to act like a Mickey Mouse. Okay. They do like this is somewhat like to interact with the audience. Yeah, but it's a hard job because most of the people you need to act like a Mickey Mouse. It's very hard and heavy, and you must be act like you are very happy. You are happy and Mickey Mouse. But for human being, this is not okay because you are not happy. Because heavy, hard, you will not be happy. So if we can use AI technology in this industry, it's nothing about how helpful or how efficient, or we think about how far it can create. Yeah. Is it possible in the future? What do you think?
Yeah. So that's part of making C3PO, right? It's tough because C3PO is complicated. So, but maybe Mickey Mouse is less complicated. I don't know. He doesn't have to do everything that C3PO does. So. And also it depends upon who you are trying to interact with. So I'm sure there are many adults who would like to interact with Mickey Mouse. I've seen them. But there are many more kids who would like to. And as long as the kids have the favorable impression and don't think, oh, that's just an artificial intelligent robot, then it's good, right? So kids can be very difficult to, I have two. I have their boy and girl twins. They're 12 years old. They can be very difficult. And they're wonderful, but they can be hard to fool, and they're very perceptive, sometimes more so than grown-ups, right? Because we come with assumptions about what we think should be happening. So I think it's a great application, but also very challenging one.
But I also noted some kind of very interesting example, like the robot, service robot in the restaurant, in the supermarket. I just thought, maybe it's not a very smart guide for the customer, but it's a very good tale for the kid. I saw lots of people like to create such kind of robot. It's not very smart, so it's adorable. I just think maybe it's a possibility to the beginning to do such kind of field. We are not think about to make such kind of robot very efficient or very capable, or just make it very adorable or very playable.
Yeah, big eyes.
And can interact with the people and cheer people up or make people smile. What do you say? Is it right direction?
Yes, so at Disneyland in Los Angeles, there's the Monsters Inc. ride. You probably know the movie Monsters Inc. from many years ago. At the end, there's a big animated monster who interacts with you in the car as you come up to the end and you're waiting to get out. And I still don't really know, I have to say, they're very good. I still don't really know whether there's a camera in that monster with somebody who's seeing us and then talking about us in a way that's funny, but insulting, right? But funny. Or if it's more like a canned script that thing is going through. Because I've been on that ride many times with my children, and it's very close to I think they really do know who's in this car with me, and I'm here, but I'm not entirely sure. But I do think that if we could get something that is not threatening, right? Not like a Terminator robot, or not like even Commander Data from Star Trek movies, right? He's threatening because he's so smart he can command an entire spaceship, right? That's threatening to us. If we can start with something that's adorable and fuzzy and cuddly and warm and happy, that would be good. Right? We can get going from there. That's what okay.
Any more questions?
Sorry. So I browsed through for some YouTube video content, and there's one time I visited a website that can create a music, 100-minute music clip in 2 minutes. As a musician yourself, do you think this will impact on the music in the area?
Yes. So this is an interesting question. So, okay. for me, music can go from being very uninteresting to very interesting to not comprehensible, right? Don't understand it. So if you think about music from many hundreds of years ago, it's very simple. And it's almost kind of boring, right? It's kind of boring. It wasn't back then, I guess, but it's kind of boring now. When we think about even rock and roll tunes like the Beatles would have written, right? A lot of them are very simple. That doesn't make them bad at all, but they're simple. So the good thing about simple is you can remember it, someone else can play it, you can sing it, and people can make a lot of money when a lot of people can remember it, sing it, and like it. Then we go to something that's more complicated, like maybe Maya Cook's music, or something even better like Mozart. Okay, very complicated, but we can appreciate all of the intricacy that goes into making all of it come together as one thing. But then if we went to a piano and we just hit random notes, just randomly, it would sound awful, right? But it's more complicated. It's more complicated. So all of the music that I've heard composed, all of it, by artificial intelligence, has been too simple or way too complicated, right? It's that part in between that is really hard to get to. That's the artistry part. The rules are pretty straightforward in music theory now. As a jazz pianist or as a saxophone player or as a guitar player, there are certain rules that we adopt in Western music. Maybe it's different in Taiwan, but in Western music anyway, there are certain things about a circle of fifths and one chord leading to another chord, and maybe there are different options about chords that you can do, and there's different scales that you can play that we accept what the sound sounds like versus we don't. And if you stick to those rules, you can play something very, very simple. And if you stick to those rules and you're really good, you can play something very interesting that sounds great. If you don't stick to those rules, you can start to sound bad, and then you can sound horrible. Everything that I've heard from artificial intelligence music so far has either been too simple or horrible, right, for me. But if we're trying to do something that is like, let's say we want a 15-second musical loop behind some advertisement on a website, and it's just going to loop every 15 seconds, that's almost robotic at that point, right? We don't have to have a whole lot of artistry to have something that would be probably good enough. Let's say 7 on a 10 scale. Somebody who's a good musician might come along and say, well, I could make that an 8 or a 9, and here's how, right? And maybe that's true, right? So then it becomes whether it's cost effective to hire that musician to do that, or if it's more cost effective to have the algorithm do it. But as soon as we start to say, I want to tell you a story like the eclipse, and I want the music to tell that story as the video is going, and I want the flute to start when the moon hits the first sunspot, and I want the timpani to go right before the total eclipse happens, and I want the glockenspiel to come right when the earth shine. By the way, when you saw the moon's features, when it went from the total eclipse to seeing the moon with all the little parts of the sun that were coming out, that's actually a reflection of light that's coming from the sun. It goes around the moon, it hits the earth, and then it comes back to the moon, and then hits our eyeball again, so that's called earth shine, right? So I had the glockenspiel for the earth shine. Then we have the part where the eclipse is almost finished, and the sun starts to come out again, and we have the tubas and timpanis again at that point, and everything else that went into that. So to me, it's very, very challenging so far to imagine any artificial intelligence is going to be anywhere close to as effective as I was there. And there are many better composers than I am, but as good as that was, I don't see us being close to that at this point, let alone making a painting, a drawing, or anything else that would impress people who are knowledgeable about that particular art level. So we can impress people with simple things, 15-second loop, a pop song that repeats the same thing for 2 minutes, and they'll go, yeah, for 2 minutes. But that's the limit so far. Long answer to your question, but it was a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the last question.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Fogel.
Yeah.
My name is YC Wen from Fubi Fu. Our office just across the street of the project. We're a team member that we are utilizing AI to develop digitization process for the office automation.
Okay.
Because this industry is kind of new. Several people really utilize AI to develop this technology.
Okay.
So we're wondering that, because you are IEEE fellows, we're wondering how we can work with IEEE, that IEEE can help us define the industry roadmap, so can help us, for future developments, or even recognize, our work of the scope.
Sure. So tell me a little more about what is it that you're digitizing.
Digitization means because office automation, lots of people that spend lots of time to digitize the PDF.
Yes. Okay.
Into computer.
Yeah.
Right. When digitizing the PDF into computer, you actually have to recognize lots of things, not just wording. You have to recognize the pattern, the number that make it because our industry, we are making PCB, single footprints,
yes.
3D modeling.
Yep.
So digitization process means you have to be very intelligent, recognize all those pattern and number, and convert it to a symbol or the data that engineer can use directly.
Yeah. So you have to deal with standards then, right?
Correct.
Yes, okay. So there are many different aspects within the IEEE, of course, and there's a standards board, and there's a standards board generally for every society within the IEEE. I believe we certainly have one in the Computational Intelligence Society. So it's important to, in thinking about how the IEEE can help, if there are new standards that are required, you would want to propose them and advocate for them so that they become the standards that you want them to be, and not someone else's that you have to adopt later, right? That's one thing. But in terms of whatever limiting aspects there are in technology, I suppose beyond the Computational Intelligence Society, we would want to maybe talk with the Communication Society, and perhaps also, if it's in a particular industry, we could focus on which is the society that's most appropriate for that. So if there are human user interface things, right, that might be the Systems Man Cybernetics Society. So we would want to go and look at what the scope is for each one of those societies. I think there's 43, give or take, and figure out which ones are the ones that are most pertinent to your particular application, and then see who has worked in the closest area to you, who can be an advocate for you within there to network most effectively. And I'd be happy to help with that if you'd like. But yeah, so we just need to start thinking like specifically, how does what you're doing match up to the field of interest, as we call it, for each of the different societies, and then find the key people. I suppose like me for the Computational Intelligence side, but there's somebody else for each one of those other ones that I just mentioned that we need to find out who those are for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But do you think we need to be IEEE members first to start with?
Well, okay, so that's a choice for you to make. I've been an IEEE member since 1991, I think, a long time now. I've had a great benefit from it. I have, many of my colleagues and friends that I've met through the IEEE too, so it's been a great source of meeting other people. All of you here today, indirectly, because I've been in the IEEE for so long, right? But you have to decide if that's really going to help you. I suspect that there's some feeling of membership that would be like we would want to help other IEEE people. I'm sure no one would say that, but it's human nature. So it probably would help to have at least maybe you or whoever's contacting be an IEEE member if we're going to try to get other IEEE help. And it's a good organization, so I endorse you doing that. But whether your whole organization should belong, things like that, that's really more for you to decide what the benefit is specifically for you, I think.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, sure.
好，考虑时间的关系，我们是你看他的演讲就知道说，当然这个人工智慧在制造业啊，比较硬的产业里面很重要的，就是好像在软性的这个服务业也是越来越多了怎么让你公司更赚钱、更有效率啊？怎么样？那些评估，AI 评估机制也是很好。OK， 好，我们今天很感谢大家的参与那假如有需要要跟他请教空费的话，我们这边李教授有一个人工智慧学会是吧？有跟他很好的沟通管道。我们希望说他这个有在学界也很有经验的，那在产业界很有经验的，可以在台湾发展这个时候有一个很好的这个请教的管道。谢谢大家的参与Let's thank you again for the programs have excellent presentation and helpful Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.